Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I did drop our icebreaker in the chat, but I will read it out loud. If you could put your name, organization, and then our icebreaker is going to be share a win or highlight from the past week, big or small. And oh, great. So we have Rod, Eastern Oregon Learning Hub, distributed 500 early literacy kits to school districts doing kinder transition programs. Overall, that is fantastic. Great work. Let's see, Jen Lane, Yamhill Early Learning Hub. We hosted our first West Valley baby shower on Thursday. Oh, that's wonderful. You guys have such great baby showers. Chris Coombs, Early Learning Childhood Hub of Lane County. A win. I think I found some funding for a data project. That is definitely a win. Great job, Chris. And let's see, Athena from South Central Early Learning Hub invited to join the Safe Babies leadership team that is starting in Douglas County. Fantastic. You'll do great on that, Athena. So wonderful. Oh, these are so exciting. Patty, Frontier Early Learning Hub, visited 5 PSP sites in one day. Oh, that's great work. I'll read one more. Shira Four Rivers. We just had a team planning for the year with all of my staff present. Oh, I bet that was so good. Well, great. I think that that is also wonderful. And I am just really excited to get us going, but I will hand it to Nancy to move us through the agenda.
Thanks, Maria. These are some great wins. Let's get started at the top of the agenda with Gabby, who's going to share an ELC update. Gabby?
Yeah, thanks, Nancy and Maria. Hey, everyone. It's good to be with this group this afternoon. It feels like I haven't been here in a while, and it feels almost really delayed to say a belated Happy New Year, but I hope you're all doing well. It's just me today. Chair Farrar Campbell does send her hellos. She was supposed to join today, but with parenthood, sick kids, so her daughter Ainsley is sick today, so she did have to miss out today. But hoping to kind of get her, involved in a future meeting with this group. So I am actually really just here to, and I just popped it in the chat. I wanted to share with this group just the overall like agenda or kind of schedule for council meetings for the 2026 calendar year. If folks can't access that PDF, please let me know. But just kind of wanted to flag for folks that we do have council who essentially identified three pretty broad priorities for this calendar year: childcare, home visiting, and Raise Up Oregon. Raise Up Oregon specifically, right, to really kind of continue with that cross-system work that we're doing within that plan. Childcare, lots of things that can go within childcare. So we actually selected childcare and kept it really broad on purpose, just to kind of be able to finesse agendas as we need to. We just had a January meeting last week, I believe, that was really more so just kind of focused on just general program updates and some rulemaking. We had agency directors join as well, and just kind of give a brief update on what their childcare priorities are for the calendar year. If you are interested in reviewing that, I'm happy to share the link and I can drop it in the chat here in just a second. We have this February meeting will be really focused on childcare. We're still finessing out the agenda, but right now what we're hoping for is a out-of-state and in-state kind of perspective on how different states are engaging businesses in becoming childcare champions. So kind of TBD. I know some of you also, are very involved with some of this work with engaging some of your business partners as well in some of your work. Chair Campbell just wanted me to ask, if there's anything that folks would be interested in kind of flagging for council, or for her to either reach out to me or reach out to her. I will post her email on here as well once I kind of wrap up. But yeah, lots of really good stuff essentially coming up. Home visiting is another, really big priority for the council. With that, we're gonna have, I believe, 3 meetings kind of centered on home visiting, just to really kind of keep council focused on some of their subcommittee work. We have a March meeting planned, in addition to like a May meeting. These will all be hybrid. Um, Workforce has its own topic as well. So just kind of wanted to put this in front of you all just to kind of get a sense of what some of our topics will be for the calendar year. Um, and with that too, since I know one of council's priorities is home visiting, I actually wanted to join this group and I'm planning on joining next month as well once I have a bit more details in terms of time commitment. But I wanted to share with this group that the council's home visiting subcommittee currently has a vacancy for a hub director. So I'm working with Rebecca Brown from Coves to get some information in terms of like time commitment and meeting times in case any of you are interested in filling that vacancy. I'll be joining next month just to share a little bit more about that. But in the meantime, if you happen to have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to assist as I can. And I know I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to pause just to see if anybody has any questions on the calendar or the home visiting subcommittee. Awesome. Thanks, Evan. I will keep that in mind. And yeah, I'm excited to join again in March once I have just some more details. Like, this is really just like a preliminary kind of announcement. But my plan is to rejoin this group in March and really just share more about time commitment, the meeting schedule, and kind of like responsibilities and expectations out of participating in that. I believe they meet quarterly. Their next meeting isn't until May, so there's definitely some time to kind of figure out schedules. But more to come. I am working, like I said, with Coves just to kind of get that time commitment really kind of hammered out before I join next month.
Any questions for Gabby? Just checking. I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Awesome.
I think that's it, Gabby. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope we'll see Liz soon. We'll talk about scheduling that.
Thank you. Yeah, we will definitely make some time for her to rejoin and either give another update or, like I said, I know with these agenda items, a lot of it will likely relate to some of the work you all are doing. So you may get pinged by me or Liz as we start developing some of these future agenda items, because we always like to partner with you all and our other dog partners just to really kind of showcase some of the work that you all are doing regionally. So thank you so much. And it was really good to see you all.
Thank
And I'll
you.
drop Liz's email in the chat just in case anything, if case anybody wants to reach out to her.
Thanks, Gabby. Next on the agenda is Dylan from our RAD office sharing information about the dynamic view of the quarterly report. He's going to give a little tutorial. We ended a little bit early, so I'm not sure if he's on yet. I'm just looking. Don't think so. We can ping him, and in the meantime, Maria and I have a couple of quick plugs that we can make. You don't have to wait for the newsletter for it. The first is just a reminder that the Memorandum of Understanding with CCR&R is a deliverable that's due at the end of the month. And we have some new resources for you. We have some guidance to kind of walk you through the process. We've got a template that's optional that you can use or not. And we have something called an attestation form, which is new this year. And it's an option to use if both directors are not new and you've reviewed your past MOU and you don't have any changes. So it's a smart sheet form, and you just answer a couple of questions, and with your email that is kind of your signature that you've agreed that the last year's form will continue on. So we will put all of that information in the portal, and then we'll also put it in our February 9th newsletter. Maria?
Great, thanks, Nancy. And then I think our second reminder or little just plug is that we just wanted to remind everyone that we still have our spring gathering scheduled for April 29th and 30th. And so we were able to confirm a hotel block for the Best Western Pendleton Inn, and that hotel block will be open until March 28th. And so we are also going to be putting in a high-level agenda, and we want some feedback from you all. And so we are going to be getting that out to you all by the end of the week is our hope. And please, we'll have a survey that you can just give us your feedback on what we do have planned, and would just love to hear from you. But any questions about the spring gathering or feedback, you can use that form or feel free to just reach out to Nancy and I. We're really eager and excited to be meeting with you all in person. And yeah, we just really want this to go well. So really open to feedback and are still in the beginning stages of planning for that, but really excited. Perfect.
Dylan's going to hop on in just a minute.
I think while we wait, we're open for any questions on either the MOU or the spring gathering. Any questions that are popping up for anyone? Do we know what time it will end on Thursday, 4:30? Planning for transportation. Yes, we are thinking the 30th would be a full day. And so we would be looking to end at about 5 p.m.
And we would start on the 29th at about 1 o'clock, I believe.
Is there a name for the hotel block or just Delk? I don't know if there's a name for the block. Let's see. Is Karina on here? Karina, do you have a name for the hotel block?
We have a link. I'll drop that in the chat so people can look at it. I'm not sure if it has a name on it, but the link is tied specifically to our hotel block.
Thanks, Karina.
And Danny writes, I will not be able to do anything until I have an agenda, so I would love that whenever possible. Thanks. And Danny, we will link the agenda in with the survey, the feedback survey. And I see Dylan is here. So unless anyone has any other questions about the spring gathering, we can pivot over to Dylan for a tutorial on the dynamic view.
Hey everybody, thanks for letting me join to show what we've been working on for this quarterly report submission. I'm gonna try to share my screen here. Okay. Hopefully that is working. So yeah, just wanted to take you all through kind of the process that we've developed for submitting quarterly reports, starting with this kind of last quarter's worth of data. So basically, you all have probably seen, I think, at a previous meeting, this Smartsheet reporting form. So it should be hopefully pretty straightforward. It's basically just a space for you to select kind of anything related to a particular initiative. We have all the questions in there. There's some logic built in, so hopefully you're only asked questions that are kind of relevant. And then you're able to kind of submit down here at the bottom. When you submit, that information goes to this kind of backend Smartsheet that we've developed. You'll see this kind of submission report that just says, yep, we got it. There's some links here to some kind of relevant other other kind of sites, you'll have the ability to just kind of open a new report if you're, answering a bunch of different initiatives at the same time. You can access the dynamic view if you realized that you needed to make a change to something you just submitted, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. You can also update the contact info that we have for you or some of your staff. So that's going to be relevant when I talk about the dynamic view as well. Or you can kind of provide a general feedback about this data collection kind of report or things like that. But the main reason I'm here is to show you the dynamic view. So, you're entering all this information here. We're looking at it in this kind of back end format. But we wanted to make sure that you all have the ability to kind of edit the information that you've edit and view the information that you've submitted, so that you can make sure that everything's correct and kind of up to date as you're working through the quarterly reporting process. So dynamic view, like I said, you can get to it using this link here. All those links that are in this kind of we captured your response page are also available, I believe, in a kind of centralized place that Nancy and Maria created for you all. But when I click that, basically it takes me to this directly to this dynamic view. Dynamic view is kind of like an aspect of Smartsheet, which is that kind of data tool that we've been using. It allows you to look at the specific rows of information or submissions that you've provided to us here at Delk, using kind of like a kind of a row-based access, meaning you only see the submissions that are associated with the email addresses that are associated with your hub. So it's a little bit complicated. It should be that if we have the contact info for anyone, any staff at your hub who might need access to that, we'll make sure that they have access to the particular rows that are associated with your hub or the particular submissions. So I added myself to Blue Mountain, which is why you can see here, some of our test data we used Blue Mountain for. So you can see this is what a view would look like if someone from Blue Mountain was looking at the dynamic view right now. They'd see all the submissions that had Blue Mountain Early Learning Hub listed as the reporting hub. You can see that right now, we're just a bunch of test data through in there, so there's a bunch of different quarters represented. You'll always be able to see kind of all the information that's been submitted for a particular hub across all quarters. And then you can see just the rest of the details of the submission kind of in each row. I think one of the key things about Dynamic View is that you are able to do editing in it. So like I mentioned, we want you to be able to make changes. So say in this test one, I called the initiative test 2, but actually, I meant to say it was test 3 or whatever. Just by clicking on the row, it opens up this details page where you can scroll through, go to a particular field, and make the edits that you need to make. So I can do test 3 there. I can click save. It should update here. There we go. So now it says test 3. It'll also say test 3 now in our backend section. So everything kind of gets aligned and updated so that in that kind of backend Smartsheet will always have access to the newest information. It also tracks the change. So if you realized a little bit down the road that I, accidentally put test 3 in there and I meant for it to say something else, we can see kind of what those changes were, just so that kind of we can track and redact anything that we need to. The editing features of this we've set up just so that you can edit a submission until the quarter, through the quarter after the submission is due. So your fall submission will be due at the end of this month, I believe. So you'll be able to submit everything through the form, and then you'll be able to edit those submissions in this dynamic view all the way until, I believe, the beginning of whatever 3 months from that is, I guess the end of April, early May. The idea is that we want you to be able to make changes, but if there are bigger changes you need to make to past quarters, you can reach out to the Delk Hub coordinating staff, and they can kind of help make changes on the back end if needed. the goal is that, yeah, you'll be able to edit kind of when stuff is still fresh, but if there's bigger changes, we just want to make sure that we're tracking those. So that's why we have that set up. I also wanted to mention that, it can be, right now there's only a few test submissions in here, but we can imagine over the course of a couple years, or even within a quarter, there may be many submissions, and you might want to create a filter to look at them. So there is a way in Dynamic View to create filters. So I can like create a new filter. We'll just call it test. Um, and then I can just select a field that I want to filter by. So say I want to filter for reporting quarter. And I can filter to a specific set of, so like say we only want to look at the ones that were for this kind of current submission. I can then filter it down to that, and I can keep that filter in there. I can delete it if I don't want to use it anymore, etc. So those are kind of the main aspects of the dynamic view that I wanted to make sure you all were aware of. If you happen to have other dynamic views, you might be familiar with kind of the interface, but there's a way to go and look at kind of all the views that have been shared with you. You can look at the specific views you've created. You can look at ones that were shared with you, or ones that were shared with different groups. In this case, we're only really caring about the quarterly hub report, but just so you know, you can access kind of other views that might be relevant for your work as well. Yeah, I think those are all the things I wanted to touch on. I'm not paying attention to the chat, so I don't know if any questions have come up. I don't see anything. Any questions on how to use either the kind of original submission kind of portal or the dynamic view for reviewing past submissions, reviewing and editing past submissions? Okay. Feel free to interrupt me if there are any questions. I did want to just like highlight, I mentioned this a second ago, but one of the key aspects of the dynamic view is that you're only seeing the submissions that are associated with the hub that you're affiliated with. In order for this all to work, we have like a backend Smartsheet contact group that associates particular addresses with a particular hub. So we just want to make sure that that contact info is kind of kept up to date. Like I mentioned, there's this update contact information form that I think may have been shared with you all. It's there in the kind of report submission, and again, it'll be available in that kind of centralized link space from Maria and Nancy. This is kind of a more general way for us to collect information about contact info, but this is where you can also make an update that'll affect who gets to see your particular hub's rows in the dynamic view. So it's important to keep that up to date. You do not need to have a Smartsheet license to access anything in the dynamic view. The Smartsheet licenses that like we have are just for creating new like reports and things like that. You will need to create, if you have not already, or if your staff haven't already created a free Smartsheet account, that's how you'll be able to access this. And you just want to make sure that you're using kind of, again, whatever the email address that's associated with you at your hub, so that we have that all kind of connected on the back end. Okay, I think that's the last point I wanted to make. Any questions, suggestions, thoughts? Okay. Well, feel free to reach out to Maria and Nancy if there's anything that comes up that you want to check in about, and they can let me know, and I'm happy to meet with anyone to look at this in more detail.
Dylan, I'm seeing a chat in the,
Yes, I see
yeah,
that
Chris Coombs
too.
asked, can you talk more about creating a free Smartsheet account?
Yes, I think that it should be relatively straightforward. I'm happy to like find the documentation about how to do that and share that with you all. The main thing is that, again, we just want to make sure that the email addresses that we're using to create that account are going to be the ones that are your kind of official hub email addresses, so that when we're doing the kind of staffing contact sheet stuff in the background, it's all lined up. But yeah, I'll find some of the Smartsheet documentation about creating those free Smartsheet accounts and make sure that you all have that. Yeah, good question.
Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, Chris is saying she'd appreciate the directions. And as questions come up as you're completing your quarterly report, please reach out to Maria and I. And if it's something technical, we'll connect you with Dylan or Avery in the RAD office. And I see Rod shared being part of the pilot. I think this is very well done. Does not take a ton of time and accurately reflects all the work we are doing. That is great to hear, Rod, and big kudos to Dylan and the RAD team who have been just amazing and helping us realize a more systems level approach to gathering quarterly report info. So thanks so much, Dylan.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
And to our piloters, thank you so much.
Yes, that was Athena and Rod. Really appreciate that. It really, I think the final version is much improved because of it. And with that, I think Heidi just jumped on the call. I'll give her a moment to settle in. Hey, hi, Heidi. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. How are
Well-
you all?
Just had a great discussion about the quarterly report, and I think we're ready to transition over to your part of the agenda, unless anybody has any questions.
Okay, I'm pulling up the
Okay.
PowerPoint. All right, I'll just start there and then we'll go from there. Okay, let me put it on show screen. Okay, all right. Before I share screen, just as a recap, gosh, we have, I have on behalf of all of our work together, had some listening sessions this last month with Backbone leaders. And I had 4 separate listening sessions of about an hour each that were in those groupings that we shared with you the last time I was with you. And I can't remember them off the top of my head, but we had about, I think, 4 backbones in each group and just had a really rich discussion. I was really pleased with how they went. I'll just share that with you. What I'm going to be doing with you today is to share with you the themes that I heard. And when I say themes, it means that I have heard that from more than 3 people. So I heard it from multiple people, and that would then elevate it to a theme that related to the review and the process for a backbone change. So today I'm going to just walk through the questions that I facilitated during our time together with the backbone leaders, and then what those themes are. And then I'd just love to hear what's coming up from you, what questions does it raise for you, what reactions and reflections do you have? And I'll say one caveat before I dive in is that oftentimes, and this is common with listening sessions, while I was very clear about the purpose of the listening sessions, and I also did a piece on the whole background of early learning hubs, when they were established, the purpose and the role of early learning hubs. And when I ask questions, they're very specific to related to the review that we've been talking about, a review process for early learning hubs and the backbone change process. Often people use that as a chance to share some other thoughts, maybe other thoughts about DELC and Preschool Promise or something completely unrelated. So that's just a caveat I just want to put out there that is very common in a listening session to occur. And I've really tried to narrow the themes or bring the themes that were related to the review. All right, here I go. Let me pop up my PowerPoint. Okay. So these were the 5 questions that we used to guide the conversation with Backbones. And these I had shared with you over email and in a previous time that we were together. But what are the qualities of a backbone that support a successful early learning hub? How do you see the backbone supporting the governance council's ability to make decisions and implement actions? And then we reviewed the prompts that could lead to a backbone change. Those prompts, just as a brief reminder, are if the backbone said they no longer want to be a backbone of an early learning hub, whether mid-contract or at the end of a contract. The other prompt is if the governance council decides they would like to seek a new backbone. And then that third prompt is if DELC were to find unmitigated issues that just were not resolved. So then we had a discussion about that. What questions come up for you? What feedback do you have about the process? And then the fourth question, given new rules and new grant agreements that they all have, are there areas where additional clarity and guidance from DELC would support your backbone? And then what are important evaluation criteria for a backbone, whether existing or if there were a new applying backbone? All right. So I'm going to walk through the themes, and I've organized the themes around some of the questions. The questions 1, 2, and 5 were very similar. So themes sort of were consistent in this question area. So those questions are the qualities of a backbone that support a successful early learning hub, and how they see the backbone supporting the governance's ability to make decisions and implement actions, and then important evaluation criteria for a backbone. So the themes that emerge, first and foremost, heard this right quick, mission and values alignment. Mission and values alignment were where the backbone needs to have a deep commitment within to support the objectives of the early learning hub and early learning in general. I heard weaving in the work of the hub into the backbone's work, for example, into the backbone strategic plan. So ways that the backbone can demonstrate how they're really weaving in the priority of the hub work. And it requires that the backbone have a unified mission that aligns with Raise Up Oregon. The next 3 themes that emerged were related to fiscal stability, the role of providing administrative capacity and infrastructure, and risk. So fiscal stability first is the ability to float money, the ability to sort of fill in the gap if there's a need for cash flow. So ability to float money, having cash on hand if a hub were to change backbones. From the few hubs that have changed backbones over the last 10 years, there were some tips that emerged, and one of those was having a significant amount of cash on hand. Under administrative capacity and infrastructure, those were things like grant management, compliance, contracting, financial management, legal risk, HR. And I heard governance councils are experts in their own field, implementing Raise Up Oregon and DELC priorities. They don't want to have to deal with these they shouldn't have to deal with these administrative functions. And then the ability to be flexible and pivot as needed is important, that the backbone have that capacity to do that. Risk was something that just I heard and emerged. The backbone needs to have the ability to absorb risk. There were questions that emerged around what is the role of the hub and the governance council to support the areas of risk and compliance that the backbone holds. So the backbone, what is the role? What could the role be? What is the role? All right. Additional themes in questions 1, 2, and 5 relate to leadership and representation on the Governance Council. I heard that there's a need and would like a way to that there's a need for involved leadership from the backbone. So having strong communication with the backbone and having strong presence with the backbone and Governance Council to support the hub's strategic plan and role. I heard that it's really important that the backbone holds a deep understanding about the purpose of the hub, the roles of the hub, and the responsibilities of the hub. I heard conversations about representation on the Governance Council. There were some questions that emerged around it. However, there were a lot of conversation around the Governance Council sits on the backbones, having someone from the Governance Council sit on the backbones board to align efforts. So having backbone leaders on the Governance Council in addition to having Governance Council members on the backbones boards, really in that spirit of alignment. There were questions about the role of the backbone on Governance Council. Can we sit on the Governance Council? Do we have a vote? There were just some questions around it that emerged, and probably an area that could use some just additional clarity for some. Okay, related to question 4, given the new rules and new grant agreement, are there areas where additional clarity and guidance from DELC would support your backbone? So collaborative relationship between the backbone and the Governance Council with role separation and clarity emerged in, now that I think about it, a lot of the questions, except for number 5. Role, and that would be having role clarification, including that Governance Council decides how to spend the funds, hub funds. I heard there's a desire that there's a need to develop a process for onboarding new leaders of the backbone and also to Governance Council to really clarify the role of both. I heard there's a desire to include backbone leaders and governance chairs in more communication with DELC. So having the 3 entities, the director, the backbone leader, and the governance chair, having the opportunity to be together at some points to share that same communication so there's not a misunderstanding. This needs to be deleted. We've already talked about it. The backbone having a unified mission that aligns with Raise Up Oregon. And I also heard collaboration between the 2 emphasis, backbone and Governance Council, with an emphasis on community voice.
Heidi,
Oh.
we've got some
Questions?
comments here if you
Okay.
want to look at those. I think
Thanks.
regarding the ESD board members and the backbone, Alicia says, how could they be on the ESD board? They are voted in. And then Rod also shared that board members must be elected
Oh, on ESD boards. Sure.
on the ESD board.
Sure.
I'm wondering if
Yeah,
that conversation
ESD boards are elected. So unless you pulled someone off the ESD board onto the Governance Council, you wouldn't be able to have one on both.
Sure. And thank you, Rod and Alicia, for just that clarification and process for the ESDs. And keep in mind, I heard from all backbones. Some are ESDs, some are nonprofits, some are, CCOs, so, I was hearing these from all different types. And that process is important to understand. So thank you for raising that. Okay. We're almost through here, team, and then I'll stop screen sharing. Related to question 3 around the process, the prompts that could lead to a backbone change and process. I asked what questions come up for you and what feedback do you have? And the theme I would say that really emerged was around bylaws clarity and process. So include a process if the backbone chooses to no longer serve as the backbone, wanting to make sure that's part of bylaws. So not only if Governance Council were to choose to change backbones, in addition to, if the backbone were to choose, what would that process look like? I heard a desire for clarity around the role of the backbone board related to bylaws. For example, bylaws in some backbones are approved by the backbone board. So that was a question around clarity around, is that okay? And should it be, should that happen? You know, so more clarity around that. And then a suggestion, add more details to the prompts. In addition, provide a way to surface issues early, maybe through like an annual assessment that the internally they can do, or just some ideas we're kind of bouncing around how can we make sure if there are issues with the backbone and the governance council that there are ways to surface it early so that there can be problem solving early. Okay, this is my last slide.
We've got a couple of, just to go ahead and get the chats before we're too far down the road. Chris, could you just provide a little more context on your question about the backbone bylaws?
Sorry. Yeah, but Danny kind of answered it. So the backbone saying they want to process if the backbone decides they don't no longer want to be the backbone, that should be in the hub's bylaws. And I was just thinking it should be actually in the backbone's bylaws. But Danny said not all backbones have bylaws.
Gotcha. Right. Right. Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Chris and Danny. All right. Additional considerations emerged throughout, and I just thought I'd try to capture them if I heard them more than 3 times. There were quite a few comments around the review process. Don't require all hubs to do a really deep, extensive review if only a few are struggling. So there was one suggestion that emerged or in related to this same conversation around like different levels of review, like a differentiated review. Again, in the same theme, minimize administrative work in a review so it's not overly burdensome and there's some flexibility. Again, this is actually already here. So identify a way to surface problems early, annual assurances, complaint procedures. This understanding backbone constraints and regulations, this was one that sort of stepped outside of only hub funding. However, it did come up in terms of like staffing and staffing requirements, or just understanding the constraints and regulations that some backbones have. And then I heard that there's some worry that some won't want to be backbones because of the work involved and the commitment. Okay, that's it. Those are my reference slides. Okay.
There's a really great suggestion in the chat from Abby. Abby, I was wondering if you could just unmute and talk about that a little bit.
Just some of us are dual hubs, so we do some of this work with DELC, but we also work with the team at OSU. And our OPEC work has us do an RFP every couple of years. I'm not endorsing that. It is a lot of work, but one of the pieces that they have us do is a rubric where we sit down with a representative from our backbone and rate ourselves and add comments. If you're looking for something that's like an example of a goodness of fit rubric, that might be a starting point.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. I think that OPEC has, that's just another model that can be looked to. So really appreciate you raising that, Abby, just how that experience has been for you. Thanks, Rod. So just any other reflections that Find my little notes here. Or questions that are coming up for you as you hear the themes that have emerged.
Shira, please.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for doing all of this work. I know it was a lot. I had two questions. Renee kind of took one of them. But A is when and it was like one of the first couple of slides you shared about cash on hand. Who's cash on hand? The backbone has to have cash on hand, or the hub, or a new backbone? Like what? I was just wondering if you could say more about that.
Thank you.
And then I'll hold my second question till you.
Okay. Thanks, Shira. Both. The backbone needs to have that ability to float money, which is cash on hand. And I also heard that the hub needs to have cash on hand if they were to change backbones. Checking to see who's here. Because of the cost that it can take for the hub to move from one backbone to another. I had heard from one backbone up to $300,000 was needed for their change to occur
Thank
from
you.
the hub. Yeah.
And then my second question, I think it's probably a longer answer. But just what are we to do with this information?
Yes, great question. Well, next steps are to hear from governance chairs. As you all know, I'll be having some listening sessions the week of February 16th with governance chairs. We'll bring those themes back to you in March. And I believe that our hope is to also bring you, given these themes, some suggestions, some ideas around how these themes can impact what criteria should be included in a review. So then we can start working on that to start defining what that process might look like, what the criteria and evaluation kind of nuggets should be in a review, in addition to backbone change processes. Does that help, Shira? Okay.
I see, Danny, do you want to unmute and share your thinking there? And then Chris, you're after Danny.
Yeah, I know that this came up for some of the other hubs who had to transition, and so I know about it because historically it has happened. There was a requirement at one time, and I'm not sure if Delk still has it or not, but that a nonprofit backbone and any backbone really needed to be able to float hub coordination money for 1 quarter while contracts were transferred over to accommodate for, gaps in contracting at other times. And so they had to have 1 quarter of hub coordination funds at a minimum sort of in store to be able to float the hub in case of need, while waiting for ELD Delk money. And so that's where the need for either hub money or backbone money on hand sort of came from, is that somebody has to float in the time that it may take to complete a transition and contracts and keep the hub running during that time.
Thank you, Danny. That's helpful to reflect back. Helpful to know.
Chris?
Thanks, Nancy.
I am curious how hubs are supposed to accumulate cash, because we have to spend down our grants and we can't use Delk funding to fundraise, and we're not a 501c3. So in the event, how would we get $300,000 in cash reserves?
I would not know that answer, Chris.
I can try to answer that. I will also say that some of this is old information, right? It may not be relevant to the way that Delk operates now, and they have a new grant office and things work differently at Delk than it did when it was ELD, and some of these themes are long held beliefs, and it's been a while since any hubs transitioned. When we were regularly drawing a quarterly amount of hub coordination, that was how some hubs had saved money prior. That is no longer, like, we used to just draw a flat amount every quarter, regardless of what your expenditure was. That's how that worked. And if you didn't expend all of that, some folks had separate accounts where that would live, where if you had a quarter that was more than that, or you had more expenses, or you would spend it out by the end of the year. And so some hubs had been able to save certain dollars over other dollars, not spend for a time if you are planning for that at times. It does become a time crunch because, of course, your contract has to be spent when it has to be spent. And now we draw according to expenditure, which was not used to be the requirement. So how you would do it now, I don't know.
Thanks, Danny. Evan, can you speak to your comment?
Oh yeah, it's not a big deal. I'm just calling out that if we want to use that 1/4 of hub coordination funding standard, this last grant agreement we folded, but the healthy, stable, and attached funding pool, I think, kind of into the hub coordination funding. So it would be a little bit bigger than what it would have been historically. Like if you think of hub coordination as doing a lot of FTE and general operating support and using that as like the mechanism for how you're judging to float during a transition, it might be a subset of hub coordination, not all of it, since we made it a little bit bigger this past grant cycle.
Yeah, because 1/4 of hub coordination for a transition makes sense. 300,000, there's a lot of hubs that couldn't get anywhere near that to transfer. And then the other thing that I see as a problem, if someone was going to move, is if you're requiring something high like 300,000, then one, they almost like have to figure out a way to save up, but they can't because you have to have your expenditures in. And the only other way is to wait until like your contract had already came in instead of like planning ahead so it could be done at the change of a biennium or a year. This kind of makes it messy, even more messy, depending on what the amount is.
Thanks, Evan and Alicia. So one of the other next steps, and if you still have reflections or questions regarding any of the themes you've just heard, please feel free to just continue to raise your hand or pop in because we can continue to talk about it. One of the other next steps that we've talked about is hearing from family advisory members. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about what suggestions do you have to hear from family advisory members? And what would be important to hear from them to inform this review process, or if a hub were to change backbones in those specific scenarios?
Heidi, real quick, I think we missed one comment up above from Shira. I think when we were talking about the rubric for goodness of fit, I did see that you put in there are some downfalls with it, though. One cannot be fully honest. And then I see some agreement from Chris Coombs. Yep. So I just wanted to surface that and make sure that we did have that read aloud for our recording and just making sure that I did see that, Shira. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. I think it's just a part of the piece that we just need to keep central, or I would just love for us to keep central, is that, remember, when you met with our backbone agencies and you're hearing all of this, these are our bosses. So we can't, it's just such a it's just a different dynamic. Like we can't say things that Delk might be able to say. I could say for myself, my relationship with the governance council is not that way. Like they don't sign my paycheck, they don't do my evaluations. It's very different. And so I guess that's the part that I just like that comes up and when we do our rubrics for OPEC is, there's just pieces where, I've brought it to somebody and they like, let's put all, we're doing great. And I'm like, I don't think so. But there's no really mechanism right now for me, other than like a one-on-one conversation with Shauna to say, I'm submitting this, but this isn't really accurate in my opinion. And so I think like that might be one of the missing links that's important to think about is what is the mechanism where any of those three parties, right, the hub, the governance council, or the backbone entity can kind of wave the white flag, like I need some mediation, I need some support, I need some help, so that we're not coming in and putting our jobs in jeopardy.
Yeah. 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 Thank you, Shara.
And I'm seeing just continuing the discussion about funds and reimbursements. Krista says, I guess our backbone is continually fronting the funds because we are doing quarterly reimbursements to basically refund for expenses incurred. And then Danny responds, yes, fronting, but they have a contract for reimbursement, so not quite the same as floating. I think that's great to get the semantics really crisp. And then Renee says, honesty has risks. I love the idea, continuing with Renee, of having governance council chairs, backbone, and hub directors meeting with DELC on a specific timetable. Thanks, Renee. Do you want to share anything else about that?
I think in the spirit of identifying things before it becomes a crisis, having everybody at the same time sharing concern, so there isn't triangulation or closeted frustration or all the grousing. We spend a lot of time grousing about backbones and the things that are not working. With the acknowledgement that it's really hard for many to have those honest conversations. And we are not the contract holder to the backbone. And so in this really odd relationship that we all share together to do this work, we also never come together as a team to identify for a specific region what's working and what's not working. And I think that is a really good place to start, and see what happens. See if some things can get identified and clarified and moved forward rather than doing all of these weird little workarounds or suffering moments that seems to kind of be the way that it is right now.
Thanks for expanding on that, Renee.
And I'm seeing Chris respond to Renee's thoughts on that there can be a weird power dynamic. And so, Chris, are you agreeing with Renee that it might be helpful to occasionally bring everyone together as a way to kind of balance the power dynamic?
Maybe. Maybe if DELC comes in with some specific questions, then it would be easier to answer them together in an honest way. If you just bring everybody together and there is that weird power dynamic, then it's really hard to just say, oh, this is going on. We just went through an MOU process with our backbone and it took 9 months or something like that. And there were some heated discussions and we finally got to a good place, but it's just not a comfortable place to be in. You have to have willing participants on all sides.
And Chris, do you want to share a little bit about the result of that 9-month process?
We came out with a review or a MOU that we all felt really comfortable with. And that was great because there was never anything in writing about the relationship between the hub and the backbone. So now we have sort of some guardrails and some, I'm lucky I have a strategic advisor who's willing to take the heat, so I'm not having to take the heat. And she really pushed on a lot of things, like Shira said. As far as supervision, I'm dual supervised by the governance and the backbone, and they're going to work together on a review. We had to push pretty hard for that. And there were other things that we just had to come to agreement on. But in the end, I feel like it's a great MOU.
Thanks, Chris.
Patty writes, not all backbone and hub relationships are not working or difficult. Just don't want to create awkwardness with our backbone. Kind of in the don't fix what isn't broke category.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Well, how about we move to the questions I had for you? I'll pause. Danny, your note.
Yeah, so it looks like Patty's chat created some more thinking around that. Danny writes, some of us are trying to fix things without getting fired. It's a delicate balance. And Shira shares, speaking of evaluations, I wonder if Dell can contribute to evaluations. You all know more about my work and my progress than my backbone. Marissa agreed with Patty. It's interesting.
Can I just ask, Patty, are you saying, you wrote that kind of coming out of the conversation about the shared space? Is that what you're responding to? A reflection about that having that shared place when you don't have issues could create awkwardness, or was that in response to something else?
Well, it just seems like, I'm not seeing a lot of the same situations that other hubs are seeing. I feel like we have a really great working relationship with our backbone. So, the conversation seems a lot about, when Heidi's talking to backbones about how, we can get out of being in that relationship with the backbone or change, or they can. So I don't know if it just feels a little heavy for if nothing's wrong with the relationship.
All right. Thanks, Patty and Becky, for seeking clarity. I always appreciate your questions, Becky. Okay. Shall we move? Family advisory members. What suggestions do you have to hear from family advisory members? And what would be really important to hear from them to inform the review process? And if hubs were to change backbones in those specific scenarios?
Athena?
So I know things that have come up for our family governance is around how they can receive stipends or receive financial compensation for participating And we've heard as we've gone through discussions, backbones have different policies around that. So whether they can provide alternatives to a cash, like a check. If a family doesn't have a bank account, how can we provide funds that are reasonable and that make sense for families and that are accessible? And how can we be intentional about that? And I know that that's something that's come up often, and how, and so I know that that's a question that has been posed to some family governance councils around, like, what do you need to be able to authentically engage, and how can, they're not necessarily going to understand the dynamic between Backbone and the hub and things like that. But I think more questions around intentionality and how they can be supported in coming authentically are things that could be really helpful, whether that's technology support or stipends or different things like that.
Thanks, Athena. Other suggestions? Yeah, Shira.
I would just, my suggestion is around, like, how do we gather the information from families in ways that they're invested and that are related to them? Like, I have a very active family leadership council. We have 3 representatives on our governance council from that group. I have one just moved up to the vice chair, so that's amazing. But like, and one is on our bylaws committee, but like, really, when we start getting into all of the like really nitty gritty, I see her eyes glaze over, and I don't blame her. I would glaze over too if I didn't, if I couldn't, if I could. And so how do we make it more instead of like, this is, I mean, the problem I've been thinking about for a while, but how do we create the environment where families can have some input instead of like, we have this thing and then this family thing over here, and then we want your input, but how do we make it like it's on hubs really to like, take out these pieces and this might be relevant, that might be relevant, but it doesn't seem like and maybe there is, and we just haven't heard from them in a bit, but it doesn't seem like there's anybody at Delk that is representing the families. And so it kind of comes out like as an afterthought, but yet the expectation on hubs, and I'm so glad it is because I absolutely love my family leadership council. And it is what fills my cup, so thank goodness for them. But yeah, I'm just like, on us, it's an important thing, but it feels like we have to mush it in to what's already there in the most clinical terms.
Thanks, Shira. I see Abby has a comment. I think this question is a little hard because the work is really complex. We have a blossoming family leadership council, but we really focus on building their skills and competence for engaging as leaders and advocates. We don't focus much on the inner workings of the hub system. It's hard for families to attach because we're not a direct service provider like Head Start. It's really interesting. And then Chris shares our Family Leadership Council is starting over, so very few members would know about the inner workings of the hub. Also, Delk would need to compensate them for their time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then lots of great thinking here. Athena says, since our families determine their agenda, it would be complex to bring questions to a meeting. We could potentially send out surveys or something like that to reduce the amount of time it takes to get feedback. And Rod is agreeing with Abby. We are in the same position in our region. Jen is also agreeing with Abby. Our PLC has plenty of thoughts and energy around the work of the hub, but they don't really know much about our relationship with the CCO, which is the backbone. And Abby, do you want to just unmute and share this thought here about the question? Oh, wait, sorry. My comments are, my chat is doing weird things right now.
I can just say, like we have Head Start representation on our governance council, and their parent leadership group is really their policy council, and they get to set policy that impacts like the children's experience in Head Start. And so they're a direct service provider, and when they participate in policy council like that, they have a direct influence that they can kind of see and understand. That's harder for us because we're not the Preschool Promise site. We're not the provider of care for their kids. And so sometimes I think it's hard for parents to get attached to us when there are other opportunities in the system. And so what we're really trying to do and say to our partners right now is that we're here to support your families as leaders. So if you have families who are maybe not confident to engage with your policy council or not confident to participate in your advisory group, we really want to help them build their skills so that they can use those skills across settings that maybe do have more of that direct service role. And I think that ultimately is the most important part of family leadership, is building them as leaders and advocates. And I think it's less about them needing, it takes a lot to understand the relationship between the hub and the governance and the backbone and DELC and who's who and what's what. And we could spend a lot of time with parents trying to explain all that. And I don't think they're going to care that much because it doesn't directly influence them. And it would be a lot of time that we could have been spending building their confidence, building their skills, and helping them follow their interests.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Abby. Yeah, Jen. Yeah, great point. Yeah.
Just for purposes of the recording, I'll just share what these say. Jen is saying, or it will make families nervous and start rumors in the community. And Renee agrees, families want to positively influence their community, not sort out internal issues.
I'm wondering if I'm wondering about the role of family advisory council members in providing feedback in this content area. I don't know if that's an appropriate question to ask, and kind of looking to y'all. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, if you think when we think about the review and the backbone change.
I could think that they maybe would be involved with like reviewing how they feel about the hub or something like that. But the relationship between a hub and a backbone, I don't know that it would be really necessarily needed. I guess you could ask the parent council if they're getting enough things out of the hub, if there's enough projects they think, and kind of if they agree in the direction the hub's going, or if there's things they'd like to see, but I don't see how they could go past that.
Yeah. Thanks, Alicia.
Vanessa, do you want to unmute and share your thinking here?
Sure. Last year we embarked on a strategic planning process, and we did appreciative inquiries with our board and with our PAC and with our staff members, and really came through all the themes of that to create our our direction, but we also updated our mission, vision, and values based on all of those themes that came from those meetings. But RPAC is very involved in that what they came up with in those meetings really move forward into their plan for the next year or 2 years. We also we spend part of our staff meeting plan, like coming up with the things we're going to ask them about, so we get their involvement. They come to a lot of our community events and our programs so that they can really speak through our mission, vision, and values through them to other families, so that there's on that same level of work. So I think that maybe as an appreciative inquiry, so appreciating them for what they do, and then inquiry-based sort of questions might get some positive information out that we can then build on as hub directors and as a DELC organization.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'm just jumping in. I really appreciate that feedback and everybody else's so far. It's given me a lot of food for thought when it comes to the family engagement piece. I just wanted to clarify, I mean, we're talking more about the dynamics with the backbones today because we just had the listening sessions and we were bringing back the feedback of the listening sessions with the backbones. But if you have thoughts about engagement with, to bring in, family voice, about any aspect of the hub system, that's helpful to know, since when we look at this process, it's not just going to be focused on the relationship between the hub and the backbone. So just want to make sure to expand, like if you're having thoughts that don't fall into the category of backbone specific, we're happy to talk about that today too, even though we started with the feedback from the backbone session.
I see Athena sharing. I think it's important to get what's important to them to determine how backbone policies are impacting them. Did you want to elaborate on that a little bit, Athena? I know what you're saying. Like, we really have to understand what family priorities are and anchor in that way.
Yeah, and just like how they're able to interact. So whether that's like, with ESDs, you can't like provide a Visa gift card to the families, or something like that, which if a family doesn't have a bank account, like having something like that where they can pay whatever bills they need could be important, or whether you can provide technology support or hotspots or whatever that is so that they can authentically show up.
Thanks, Athena. And Chris is saying here, we share our governance agenda and materials with our FLC so that they have an opportunity to give feedback during our governance meetings. We also have people join our FLC meetings to hear parent voice on a specific issue. Thanks, Chris. That makes a lot of sense. And then Rod is saying very similar here, Chris, very well stated. And then Jen shares, we plan our PLC meeting 8 days before our ELC, and they usually discuss the same topics. We have 2 PLC members that then carry their voice to the ELC. The ELC is the Governance Council at Yamhill. Has that been working well, Jen, that approach?
Yes, so far it's going great.
I'm hearing from you all just the ways that you have your parents, families engage with your governance council. And I'm wondering about how we might want to, how that could be a place to understand how they're feeling involved in a hub, in there could be room for understanding that as part of a review, potentially. And Athena, I'm really seeing your note. You know, it's good to understand what families, what's important to them.
I think it would be important, whether you did it in a survey or some sort of conversation with HPLC. I mean, that's intensive, but it just to understand if they feel like their voice is actually being heard and influencing the work of the hub. I think that's what it would boil down to for me.
Thanks, Jen. What are your thoughts about hearing from families over survey or in kind of a conversation, listening session or something along those lines? What are your thoughts? Mm. Mm.
Jen is sharing that her PLC doesn't respond much to surveys, but meeting participation is good. And Renee says, we have found it valuable to do both, broadly distributed surveys to capture themes and smaller listening sessions to get more content. I like that. And Shira says, I think a listening session would be good if compensated. We have about 10 to 12 active members, but there are many more parents in the community and they don't speak for all of them. So probably both.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Chris is saying, I think they would need a lot of context before a listening session.
Yeah. I think we have a little thinking to do on that one, on this. It's feeling family voice is important, and you know, just how it can be relevant and connected. I think these are some really helpful suggestions. Yeah.
Renee?
I think it's also important just to note that our family leadership councils are really coalitions of the willing, which by definition means that maybe more of those families are having more of their needs met and have access to more supports to make it likely that they would say yes to that opportunity. And so I think broader surveys are really important so that each region is able to ensure that the voices of the priority populations of that region are represented by leveraging partner connections to families that maybe are not around those family leadership council tables. So just wanted to flag that.
Thanks, Renee. And Jen, I see your comment. Do you want to unmute and share a little more about that?
Oh, I think it's important if we include the parent voice in a review, which we should, I totally think we should, but just to keep in mind that a lot of times the parents don't understand the limits of what I can do with 5 staff people and the amount of money that I have. And they have so many great ideas and so much passion. And so framing the questions in such a way that it's like, well, are your ideas being considered? Do you feel respected? Not does everything you've put out there actually happen? You know, see what I'm saying? There's a difference. So it's keeping that in mind.
And Abby, do you want to share yours? Do you want to speak to that?
Just thinking about the parents are busy, their capacity is limited, so we try to plan so that if they know what to expect. So I would say if this is an add-on ask, that it be thoughtful and planned out in advance. But like we only meet every other month, and they already have an agenda for February and a trainer coming in April to talk about advocacy. So that's
good to keep in mind.
You know, something someone said is kind of reverberating in my head about, you know, the family councils, they're wonderful. But I know from experience on a lot of councils and stuff, you get usually those that are really happy with something or really disgruntled because of something, and not necessarily like the hub, but maybe community or what's going on in childcare or, you know, something like that. So you get kind of the two ends of the spectrum. I really like the idea of, you know, some of those parents that somebody mentioned before that aren't on the community, but they're very involved and they're around the community, and kind of figuring out a better way to, you know, obviously maybe weight it and give more weight or look at what the parent council said, but also to get it out to some of those that maybe don't have the time or they don't have the transportation or something's changed in their life and they can't be on that council, and trying to get that out to a little bit of more of everybody. I'm sorry, that was kind of a scattered thought. I don't know if that completely makes sense.
Thanks, Alicia. And all of your comments, this is really helpful.
And I'm seeing Shira say we need to figure out what the ask actually is before we engage families.
Yeah. Can I turn that around to ask that question to you all? What should the ask be related to informing a review and or backbone change? Rod, you can kind of chew on that a little bit, but Rod, I saw your hand up, so if you want to like jump in, and we'll circle back to that.
Well, no, I was just thinking to get a broad parent voice through our coordinated enrollment. We already survey families, but there could be some questions in that survey that may help once it's developed. But that would be a good broad family perspective versus just our I think everybody's got a different name. I was going to say our PAC, our FLC, everybody's kind of got a different name, but and I know we have very good participation in our surveys through coordinated enrollment.
Okay, so like adding on to a survey you already have that touches your families. So if there is an ask of families, related to the review of the hub system. What should that ask be? What would be helpful to help inform this process, this emerging process of a review? What criteria is important? Oh, sorry, more going on.
While folks are thinking about that, I'll just share what Jen dropped in the chat. We get good participation in the surveys that we share through all our outreach events because those are connected to a raffle, but they are about the broader ECE system, not the hub. Participants may or may not know much about the hub itself.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Jen.
Mhm. It's complicated. Shira.
I think it's just an interesting dynamic because the families are our end users. And so we are kind of very delicately bringing them into like, used to have an old boss. I don't like this phrase, but I guess it applies here, like how the sausage is made. I'm sure there's better analogies, but so like we're bringing them into the back of the kitchen. So, but I don't think I think that's like we've already brought them kind of more in than they've been before. I think it needs to be really ironed out of like, first of all, what say do they have about the inner workings? And like this is like kind of coming into our homes, into the background, like the family dynamic between like maybe ourselves and our backbone. And I think it's just a very probably unique to each one of us and fragile and needs to be supported with like sensitivity and care because we don't want our dirty laundry out there. Like we take a lot of steps to keep our dirty laundry with the dirty laundry goes. And so yeah, I mean, I'm not saying like we have this whole thing to hide, but I think like we can't just like open up and like come look at our deepest diaries. Like it's a balance, and I'm not sure what that balance is, but it feels a little bit like it's going to take some sensitivity and care.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see some things in the chat. I'm not sure if we read Chris's. I don't think so. I think it would be good to know if the councils feel that parent voice is respected in the hub system, not that we do everything they suggest. And then we had Jen agree. Yes, exactly. Then we have Rod. That is something we have heard from our PLC is that families get too many surveys, Hub, Head Start, coordinated enrollment, OPEC, DHS, etc. I think most families are willing to fill out surveys, are either very happy and want to share or disgruntled and want to change. And then Renee, I see you said 100%. I think that was to Shira's commentary, if I'm not mistaken. Abby, an open-ended question like, tell me about the barriers to participation in hub leadership spaces you may have encountered. They may have feedback for us as hubs or feedback about how backbone policies have put up barriers. But if it's open-ended, it doesn't push in any direction. And conversely, maybe a strength-based question, tell me about an event or initiative that felt really family-centered. Those are great suggestions, Abby. Evan, I just think what amounts to an organizational development procurement process with our parent council feels like very inside baseball for them and not something supremely motivating. And then Nancy, I agree. As I also reflect on our PAC role, it's been more about being advisors, and generally their input is about experience, gaps, and ideas. Athena, my concern with open-ended as it also needs to be focused, or we are going to get everything, including the kitchen sink. Thank you for that. Those are some great comments.
Yeah. Okay. Other reflections, suggestions? I'm feeling the need to sort of sit with a lot of what you're sharing because there's some really great thoughts and in wisdom. Yeah.
I just had one more question, sorry. How is parent voice incorporated on the DELC level?
I'm just jumping in for 1 second. I think this could be answered in different ways, but I think it's a timely question. We have Cassandra Furter on our team, who is our parent leadership, parent education coordinator and cheer. I think you know, Cass. But one of the things that Cassandra is working on right now is an assessment of the use of parent voice throughout the agency and sort of a assessment of what our current status is with the use and the readiness also. So I think we're at a place where, depending on what project or aspect of work you're looking at, it dramatically varies as far as how much parent voice is embedded into the different phases of a work cycle, whether that be planning or advisory capacity, if we're doing research, whether parent voice is utilized at all, or is more along the level of something that's participatory and even co-created. I think the Spark team is a great model of a place where parent voice has been very intentionally embedded in the entire process of the Spark redesign. And then you have, I think, other aspects of our work where we're in a very nascent stage of really needing to look at ways to bring in more parent voice. So I would say there's just a lot of variability throughout the agency, would be my sort of honest reflection on that.
All right. Thanks for that. I just really appreciate all of your wisdom and experience you're bringing to thinking about how we incorporate family voice in processes, all processes. Okay. I think we're okay to sort of wrap up this time with me. Is that okay? Okay, I'm looking at Nancy and Maria and Becky. So next steps, just to remind you all that next steps are to hear from governance council chairs. I've shared with you the questions and the PowerPoint, I think, and I will be holding those listening sessions the week of February 17th. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to be supportive to you and or your governance council chair in that process. And then we'll be back together in March. I'll share with you the themes from that. All right. Anything else for me?
Thank you so much, Heidi. This was a lot of great information. Really good to see the themes and to just be able to hear from everyone in the space together. So thank you, and thanks for everyone's reflections. Becky or Maria, before we wrap up, do you have anything you want to share?
I don't think so. I think we got our reminders in early today, and yeah, I think we could pop the exit survey in. I can grab that link real quick.
All right, I'll sign off.
Maria, thank you so much,
Bye.
Heidi. Appreciate you. And thank you again for everybody's reflections, really wonderful insights, and just care in this work. Really, it just feels great to be in this space with you. We've got I'll just drop it in the hub meeting exit survey. You know how much we love hearing back from you about how the meeting went, how we can improve it, what worked, what didn't. Maria and Becky and I look at every single comment. And so we just want to wrap up. Thank you. Lots of gratitude for everyone being so engaged. And Maria and I will stay on for an extra 10 or 15 minutes like we usually do.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll sign off. Thank you all so much.